Now let's define, of course, the helper service in order to have the general helper methods. And let's begin by implementing the necessary methods. So again, let's place them and let's explain them. We have three methods right here. So the first method is the emit input content, which simply emits the content of the input that the user has written. The second is emit enter pressed. So this method is triggered when the user presses the button enter. And lastly, if the input is an email input, here we have again the regular expression for the email in order to validate the email that the user is writing at the moment. So these are the three methods that we're going to have in the TypeScript file. And now let's continue and set up the CSS for the basic input, and it is like this. So we have the title row, the input title, the input row right here for the entire input, the main input CSS, that the email icon is the icon that is presented on the left of the ion input, and of course a red bottom border that is for the email case when the user types a not valid email. So lastly, we need to focus and write the HTML content of this component. So it is right like this. So we have the title on the top, so present title and the title of the input. After the title, we're going to have an ion row and then the icons and the input. So this is the input right here. We use an ng model to set up the content of the input. This is a dynamic placeholder that takes the input placeholder input. And then on the ion input, that means on any change that the user makes on the input, the emit input content method emits the contents of the input back to the destination. This is the input, this is a regular input, and this is the email input, as we can see right here. So the email input, as we already seen, has an ng class that checks the email pattern that we have already defined. And if it is not a valid email, a red bottom border will be presented right after the input, like this, in order to notify the user that the email is not valid just yet. So this is the basic input component. And now let's navigate back to the user info component and let's continue with the HTML. So let's now define this component. So we have inside this column, we have the app based in basic input like this. And now let's set up all the inputs like this. We have the initial contents, of course. That's gonna be the get user form control value like this. And we provide the full name control name like this. This is of course a required input like this. So this is gonna be true, simply true. And let's continue with all the other. Like this, the placeholder input and the title on the input like this. So from start page and then right side and then full name placeholder and full name as the input. And lastly, let's also define the outputs of the input and let's handle them. And it's gonna be like this. So contents input writer, we're gonna have the receive input contents with the full name as a control name. And if we navigate to this method as we already defined, here is the full name tag and we're gonna set up the proper control on the form. So the proper control and the set value method in order to set the value of this control. This is right here. This is the completed full name input. Now let's continue to the email form control comment and let's simply set the email and let's explain it. So this is gonna be right here. As previously, we have the data section row, an ion column, and then again the app basic input. But this time we're gonna set up, of course, the email tag for the write control and then the is email input value as true. So to have first of all the correct icon to be presented and then the pattern to be checked in order to set up the email as valid or not. Then again, we provide the placeholder and the title, and we properly set up the receive input contents method with the email tag. So this right here is the first two inputs. So let's serve this site and let's see it visually before we continue further with the phone number and of course the profile image. Give it a moment to be created, and here it is. So here we have of course the left side component, and then on the right side component we have the two inputs like this. So here we can write our name. Let's say I write mine. So we have this right here, and then if we continue to the email, start typing an email. So test, as you can see, the red bottom border is presented to notify us that we write a not valid email. So if we write a valid email, this red bottom border disappears and the email is valid. Let's continue with the sk-tel-input and the phone number input. So after this row right here, we're gonna have the phone number comment, of course, and then we're gonna have a row like this, and let's cursor down. So again, the data section row, and then the iron column like this. So we're gonna have the title of the sk-tel-input, so the title, and then simply gonna have an ion row with the ion label like this. And now let's continue and set up the sk-tel-input. Now, if you want to see all the information regarding the sk-tel-input, you can navigate to the package npm right here. Let's see, and we have right here. So this is the sk-tel-input. Here you can see all the information regarding this library, all the implementation, of course, with the ISO code as we already have stated, and how you can use it with all the details. Here we have also all the inputs that you can provide in order to customize it per your liking. So let's continue and use this library. So sk-tel-input, and here we can have all the necessary inputs. So let's again paste it and let's explain each and every one input. So this is right here. As you can see, we have a background hex color. You can provide it a selector background hex color, which is a light blue, the input background, the border of the input, the arrow icon for the popover for the countries, the divider in the countries list. Of course, again, we have the input contents and we give the control name for the mobile tag, the placeholder input for the input, and then again we have the color of the text that is going to be written by the user, an ID for the popover right here, and here we have the initially selected country, and this is the place that the ISO code enum is helping us. So ISO code.greece, and here if we place a dot, here we have all the available countries, and as you can see there are a lot. So you don't need to write an ISO code for the country, you simply press the desired country and the framework does all the work for you. So as you can see, for Greece it's simply GR, but you can write it like this. And here we have the preferred countries ISO list. So then again the ISO code is helping us. Here we have a control value in order to present the search bar in order to write and search for the countries list. And of course, on every change on the sk-tel-input, the input emits back the contents in order to handle them with this method as we already have seen. So this method, and we set up the mobile prefix, of course, and the mobile of the user. So if we navigate back to the site, right here, as you can see, we have the phone number like this. We have special controls to only write numeric digits. As you can see, only numeric. We cannot write a space or any other. So we have an example number and the popover for the country. So here if we search, let's say for Germany, like this, here it is. As you can see here, these are the preferred countries as we already defined. So it is Greece, France, and Switzerland, like this. And here is all the others. So for example, let's select France, and here's the selected country and the ISO code, or Switzerland, or Greece, of course. This is the sk-tel-input, and now let's continue and set up the register button. So after here on the user info component, after this row right here, we're gonna have the register button like this, and we're gonna have the register button. Let's place it and let's explain it, of course, once more. We have a margin top of 20 pixels in order to have a nice distance between the two elements, an iron column, an iron row, and this is the register button. So it's gonna be disabled, and it's gonna use this method right here, as we have already seen, the check if disabled button. If the user clicks on the button, the emit provided data method is gonna be triggered, and these actions are gonna take place. So the user, an object of user information type is gonna be created. It's gonna emit it back to the right side component, and then all the contents of the form are gonna be erased. Below this iron grid right here, let's place the already register and sign in labels, these right here. We have a width of 100, again a margin top of 20 pixels in order to have a nice distance. And these are the labels. Of course, these methods do not have any functionality, and you can set up any functionality that you want. So if we then back to the site, here we have the register button, of course, and these nice beautiful labels of already register, then sign in. The form and the white box is almost complete. Now the only thing that is remaining is, of course, the select profile image component right here. So first of all, let's create and define this component. So first of all, let's create and define all the methods inside the select profile image component. So first of all, we have the inputs, which are going to be right here. So the input, and let's of course import input from the Angular core. So we have the input image icon selector, which you can define a path for the image for the selector, and a main grid background color as gonna be the color of the entire grid of the component. Of course, we're gonna have an output and some local fields, which are these right here. The output, let's place it, the event emitter, of course, and this component is gonna emit back the profile image object, as we already have seen, of data given, data as a file, which is the file of the image, and the type of the image. Now, of course, we have some local fields that we are going to use in a moment. Let's also define into the constructor the necessary dependencies, so the HTTP client and then the helper servers, of course, for some helpful methods. And here on the ng-on-init method, we are going to initially load this image from the images, the profile image, in order to show to the user the default image. So we're gonna use the HTTP client in order to get the data and the response of type blob in order to read this image and place the base64 data and show to the user the initial selected image, and we emit the selected profile image back to the user info component. So we read the image from the assets folder, we show to the user, and we simply emit the data back to the user info component. So we read it as data URL. So let's continue and set up a method that's gonna trigger the file system to open for the user to select an image. So we have this method right here. So this is a trigger, simply trigger to click on the image, to trigger the click. We need now a method in order to handle the selected image that the user was selected from the gallery or the file system, let's say. So this is the method right here. So we have on image picked. So let's see what this method does. First we check that we have a file and it is only one file. And after that we check the type of the image. the type of the file, let's say. If it is any of image type, we allow it to continue, and if it's not, we stop right here. We check and read the file that was selected, and we check specifically the size of this file. So if the size is greater than 15 megabytes, we stop right here. So here you can set up any functionality that you like for, let's say, and maybe an alert or a toast or an information model, or simply if you don't have this control, then you might have to omit it. If the image is lower than, if the size of the image is lower than 15 megabytes, here we set up the local image right here in order to show to the user the selected image, and then again we set up the object and we emit it back to the user info component. So this right here concludes the functionality for this component. So now let's set up, of course, some additional CSS for this component, and it's gonna be right here. That's gonna be all the grid with all the components. This is the CSS for the div and the small image selector. This, of course, hides the input of type file from the user that the user do not need to see. Only that opens the file system for the user to select an image, and here is a small image icon for the user. So lastly, let's set up now the select profile image component HTML. So here we set up dynamically the style.background of the entire grid with the main grid background color. Here is the default selected image. This code right here is going to present the selected image from the user, and here is the input of type file that this is going to be triggered on click and show the file explorer in order for the user to select an image. And here again, this is the selected image div that it is helpful for the user to click and show the file explorer. So this concludes the select profile image component, and now let's return to the user info component right here, and let's set up the selected profile image component. So we have the user info form right here, and let's set up, after this useful comment, let's set up the user profile image component. So we have a white background for the entire grid. We have the selected image for the small selector of images. And here we have the output of the component, which is of course a profile image type object that contains the selected image of the user. Now at this moment the form is entirely completed, and let's see how our site is looking. So this is our site right here, and we're gonna have to do a refresh in order to see it properly. So this is the site. As we already seen, this is a left side component which is complete. And now the right side component is also complete. Right here we have the full name and the email, as we already have seen, the phone number with the country selector, and here is now the profile image selector. So if we click on it, the file explorer opens up, and now we can select an image like this, and let's say we can have this right here. So the ID, and here it is an image. Now we can write our name, so let's say it is my name, like this. An email, let's say a test email, like this, and here is a phone number. So let's again say a test number, a random test number. So this is right here. So as you can see, the register button now it is activated because we already selected an image, as we already seen. We have the full name, we have an email that it is valid form, and we have also a phone number. If we tap on the register button, we see that the form has now erased all the contents, and we can see here in the console, we have of course the sk-tel-input output contents. Here is the selected image. This is data of the sk-tel-input out. So this is right here. And now with this episode is fully completed. I hope that you liked this episode, and I really hope that you gain a lot of useful information regarding Ionic Angular and frontend. Thank you very much for watching.